Hello, biologists. Welcome to our presentation. Today, with my partner Alexis Gasper, we are going to talk about algae biofuel as a renewable source of energy to our near future. So, what are algae? Algae are members of a group which including predominantly aquatic organisms. Most of them belong to the kingdom Protists, and few of them belong to the kingdom Bacteria. They are usually associated with plants that live in the water. However, unlike plants, they don't have true roots, stems, or leaves. They are autotrophs, and their main source of energy comes from sunlight, of course. Algae also reproduce very quickly in the environment of abundance of carbon dioxide, which is good because they consume a huge amount of carbon dioxide that we don't really need. As of 2021, over 37,000 species has been described, and there are more to come in the future. Some types of algae are good for the system. They are part of the food chains. For example, this giant kelp right here, invertebrates love to eat them. And these algae can also produce a huge amount of oxygen during the day through photosynthesis. However, some of them are not good to have. They are not easy to eat and they produce too quickly that may affect the habitat of other organisms. For example, this blue-green algae, aka cyanobacteria. Some of them release toxin to the water. The idea of using algae as biofuel was proposed in the early 1950s and received many attention during the emergency energy crisis of 1970s because of the triple price of gasoline and the lack of imported fuel from foreign countries. From 1980s to 1996, the U.S. Department of Energy supported the Aquatic Species Program with the main goal of producing oil from microalgae. Unfortunately, the Department of Energy faced a financial constraint with the competition of cheap oil from the foreign country. In 1995, the program was terminated. Around 2005, many algae-based biofuel companies raised hundreds of millions of dollars in private sector investment in the hope that we would produce 10 million gallons of algae fuel per year. Unfortunately, after nearly 15 years, many companies have been driven out of the business or shifted their investment to algal productions of higher value products such as dietary supplement, animal feed, and cosmetic. The only major company that still continues to funding and conducting research of algal fuel is ExxonMobil, and since 2009, ExxonMobil signed an agreement with Synthetic Genomic Incorporation to be a partner in researching and developing oil from algae to be used as a renewable, low-emission alternative to fossil fuel. They claim that by 2025, 10,000 of barrels of algae biofuels will be produced every day, which will be able to compete with fossil fuel in the future. Recently, they have been modified an algae strain that enhanced the algae oil content from 20% to 40%, which is a better quality of oil. But however, the promise of clean energy with low emission and affordable price still need a long way to go.
Thank you, Neil, for introducing the background and history of algae as biofuel. Now let's look into the technology and exactly how this whole process works. Basically, at its core, we're farming algae to produce oil for energy usage. At the top right, you can see a diagram, a visual that shows exactly how we process biomass into biofuels. The organism that we're particularly looking at is microalgae, which is an individual, unicellular, and photosynthetic organism often found floating around in the ocean. They produce biomass and triglycerides, also known as oil. The biomass can be converted into biofuels along with the oil. And these production farms can be set up in open ponds, closed loop systems, and photobioreactors. At the bottom right-hand corner, we can see two examples, but how efficient is it? Well, that's where a lot of controversy arises. It's much too expensive. From the 1980s to the 1990s, the Department of Energy in the United States concluded that algae biofuel production was much too expensive and largely inefficient to meet the energy demands of the United States. It's also a significant use of resources, in particular land, water, carbon dioxide, nitrogen, and phosphorus. It's also leading to competition, particularly in food production. If we're taking a lot of the land to be used for algae production, then the land cannot be used for food production, which can lead to issues with food security for feeding our populations. It also leads to environmental concerns. In particular, when we produce biofuels, we're still emitting greenhouse gases. And although it's going through a carbon cycle, we're still inputting carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Another area of concern is the genetic modifications that can come up when we want to produce more efficient algae. Often, algae can be genetically modified to produce higher lipid contents and to reproduce better, which, if it escapes into the environment, can lead to algae blooms that can be very, very harmful to open oceans, freshwater ponds, and for the biodiversity of the environment. Some of the implications of using biofuel of using algae as biofuel are social impacts, political impacts, and economic impacts. In social impact, we see that food security is an issue because we're competing with land to create energy instead of using it to create food for a growing population. It also can be a problem when we replace forests, wetlands, and natural grasslands for these algae-producing farms. It also has political impacts in policymaking and environmental advocacy. If we look at ExxonMobil has been very flip-floppy in their stance with climate change and global warming. This also leads to misinformation. We can also see the economic impact in using algae as biofuel. We have energy security because now we don't have to rely so much on fossil fuels, which is a finite resource. We also see diversity and competition arising by having these different energy sources. It's also one of the most efficient biofuel methods. Now, the future of using algae as biofuel, any type of energy diversification that we can use, is a great way to cycle carbon through the atmosphere and into helpful compounds that humans can use. Some of the challenges that arise that we have to get through include its energy, output, the volume of land that we take up for producing these algae farms, and the waste that comes from the algae farms. Some recent solutions that have arisen include genetically modified algae, where we can highlight some genes that increase lipid secretions, lipid biosynthesis, lipid catabolism, the characteristics of the lipids, and its content. We also have to look at the consequences of genome editing and the dangers that this can lead to if these genetically modified organisms leap into the environment. Now here's a question. Which of the following is not a significant resource used in the production of algae for biofuel? The answer is D, fish.
Here is my question to you, biologists. Unlike plant, algae lack of these features except And here the answer.
Here are our references. Thank you.